One of the oldest videos on this channel, which I did like 5 years ago, was called The Triangle of Energy. And it was my attempt to create a conceptual model for understanding how much intensity, how much frequency, and how much volume we can handle in our day-to-day jiu-jitsu training. So I thought today we would revisit that subject for those of you that are newer to the channel that maybe haven't been exposed to this idea. And I think for those of us, especially that are over 40, over 50, the older athletes in jiu-jitsu, you really have to pay attention to this in order to not break yourself and be able to continue to train jiu-jitsu as a lifestyle. All right, let's talk about it. As always, I'm Rick Ellis, and if you're curious about all the things that I'm involved with, the swag we sell, the courses we offer, and the events that I run, I have something called Old Grappler Summit, which is the premier over 40 jiu-jitsu retreat in the world. The best place to go is my link tree, and I'll put it on the screen so you can check it out. All right, so the Triangle of Energy, which I'm going to rebrand the Training Triangle. I think that's a better name for it, the Training Triangle. And my inspiration for this model was something that is really commonly said in service industries. It's a sales principle or a kind of a joke that they say in service industries, and that is the following: speed, quality, price. You can only have two. Meaning, if you want something high quality and you want it fast, well, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Or if you want something high quality and you want it cheap, well, you're not going to be able to have it fast, and so on. Well, in my model, there are also three elements as well: intensity, frequency, and volume. And let's go through these, because here too, you can only have two of those things if you're over 40 especially. And if you're even older, you may not even be able to have two. You may only be able to have 1.5 of those things. So what are they? Well, intensity is easy to understand. That's how hard you hammer in any given training session. If you're someone that doesn't take any rounds off and you do the whole warm-up and you like to train at high intensity, well, okay, that's high intensity, versus someone who's a lot more mellow, someone who maybe takes some rounds off, right? Your training intensity is going to be less. And by the way, I'm an advocate of tracking your heart rate when you spar in jiu-jitsu. Maybe not every time, but periodically it's really valuable. In business, they say if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and that's absolutely true. And it's always shocking to me when I track my heart rate when I roll, just how hard I'm pushing, even on days when it doesn't feel like I'm pushing all that hard. And it's a testament to how good a shape those of us that do jiu-jitsu are compared to the general public out there, because we can handle a lot of intensity generally. But if you don't measure it, you really don't know. Are you at 90% of your maximum heart rate? Are you training at 80%? What's your recovery in between rounds? And maybe I'll put a link to that video at the end of this video so you can watch that video that I did on tracking your heart rate, because it'll always reveal some interesting things about your training. So that's intensity, easy to understand. Frequency is how often you train. If you train 5 days a week, that's higher frequency than 1 day a week. Pretty easy to understand. The third element is volume, and volume has to do with how long that training session was. How much work did you do in that training session? If you have a 2-hour training session, and again, you don't take rounds off, you spar 8 or 10 rounds and you do everything, well, that's going to be a lot higher volume than if you go to open mat and you spar 3 or 4 rounds. That's going to be low volume. So those are the three elements, and you can only really have two, meaning if you like to hammer hard, you like to train with intensity when you train, and you also like training frequently, you're trained 3 or 4 days per week, maybe 5 days per week, well, you're going to have to dial the volume way down. You're not going to be able to do these long, training sessions at high frequency and high intensity. Something is going to have to be dialed back on, and so that means the volume is going to have to be less. You're going to have to maybe sit out some rounds. You're going to have to maybe half-ass the warm-up a little bit. You're not going to be able to do quite as much. Or if you're someone that likes a high volume of training, you don't take any rounds off, you're in it to win it, you train the entire time, and you're also very intense when you train, well, guess what? Your frequency is going to have to be less. You're not going to be able to do that every single day and recover adequately. And I should say that these values are not fixed in time. They can change over time. Let's say you're relatively new to Jiu Jitsu, you haven't really adapted your body yet to the demands of grappling, you're not really in killer shape yet. Well, you're going to have to dial everything back. But then once you're in shape, once you're in the swing of it, once your body is adapted, you can handle a higher volume, intensity, and frequency of training. So you're gonna have to modify these, manage these over time, or maybe you're someone that likes to do a couple competitions every year. Well, you can't train at competition intensity all year long or you'll break yourself. Even young competitors can't do that. So instead, what you do is you increase the volume and frequency and intensity of your training leading up to a competition, and then after the competition you go back to a more sustainable way of playing jiu-jitsu. And as an aside, by the way, this video is not really about preparing for competition, but it's been my experience that the best way to prepare for competition is to do it in 2 phases. The first phase is simply one of adaptation, where you're training your body to handle a higher volume of training. What I see happen a lot of times is someone says, oh, I've got a competition in 6 or 8 weeks. And from one day to the next, all of a sudden they're training way more frequently, they're pushing harder, they're not taking rounds off. And 2 or 3 weeks into that, they get an injury and now they can't do the competition. So for me, the first phase of competition prep is one in which you are slowly increasing the volume and your work capacity so you can handle more. And then in the second phase of your training, now you're really hitting your stride and you can train with more intensity without breaking yourself. But again, you can't do that all the time. So these things are fluid. You have to tinker with the values a little bit. Maybe you're coming back from an injury. You're going to have to dial everything back until you get back into the swing of it, and so on. So I hope that helps you kind of maybe create a mental model for how we should approach our training, because you can't just leave it all on the mat every single time you train and train with frequency. That's a recipe for breaking yourself when you get older. The biggest frustration, honestly, as an older athlete is that the mind is always willing, but the body isn't capable enough. I would train multiple times a day if I could. I've got a training partner that trains 3 times per day, and he's in his 20s, and he can handle that kind of volume. And I'm always jealous of him. I'm jealous at the rate of progress that he's making in jiu-jitsu, because I simply can't do that anymore. So we have to be smart about our training. And hopefully this helps you. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts below on this subject. Do you have a way of quantifying how much you train and figuring out how much you're capable of doing? I'd love to hear it below. All right, see you next time.